Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Joe Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Onyx. So with Onyx, I want to talk about a feature that I use quite a bit within the Hunt app that it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, and it's very simple. Once you create a waypoint, you can scroll down through, you change the waypoint color, the icon, and there's a little section with a little plus sign there that says notes. And what I use that notes section for specifically is, so putting up trail cameras or tree stands, I write any information I can about the area. If I'm hanging a trail camera, I'll put the name of the trail camera that I got, whether I need to bring in like steps to climb up to get it if I have it angled up in the tree, what the battery life's like, if it's on a scrape or what it's on. I put all those notes in there. So when I go out the next time to go check it, I can look at it. I need to, I got to remember I got to bring steps, or I need to do this, and really helps me keep organized there. And with tree stands, I'll put, as I'm there marking the tree, I can write down what wind direction it's good for, any other different key features. This, I'm have to navigate around a branch when I'm hanging in here. There's just a bunch of different things. It's nice to be able to use that within the Hunt app. So if you want to check out the Onyx Hunt app, you can go to onyxmaps.com and use the coupon code EMW. Save yourself 20% off the premium and elite memberships. The University of Elk Hunting, so Corey Jacobson, Elk 101, have put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting learning course available. And in addition to the course, their Destination Elk YouTube series will be launching soon this November from this past elk season. Very informative, very entertaining at the same point, and it's going to be a pretty cool series there. So as far as the online course goes, there's no better time to start preparing for next elk season than in the off season. So don't wait. The course is very extensive. It takes a long time to go through it, and well worth it. So if you want to check that out, head over to elk101.com. Use the coupon code EastMeetsWest. That'll save you 20% off of the online course. And Maven Optics. So Maven Optics, they have come out with the highest quality optics available at half the price of their competitors through their direct consumer business model. And what's really cool about Maven is one of the things that I like is you can customize the B series options. So you can go through on their binoculars and customize any little detail you want to. You can get engraving, you can change the body color. I mean, just whatever you think, you can do that on their website and make it your own. So if you can check out some of my photos that I have over on Instagram and on the website, where my S2 spotter, my B2s, those have all been customized for me personally. So you can check those out, and if you head over to mavenbuilt.com, use the coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift, and you can save yourself. Well, you'll get yourself a free gift, with any full price optics order. And the last thing I wanted to note was that Mountain Ops, their Opstober is still going on here for a few more days, and every order wins something. So when you put any order in for Mountain Ops, the outdoor supplements, you can either get, win a bunch of gear, or you get some sort of a discount code with every single order. And if you use the coupon code BEAU, free ship, BEAU, free ship, you get yourself free shipping on any of those orders in addition to the prize giveaways. So check that out at mountainops.com. All right, so this episode here is going to be a special one. It'll be a really good one here with my dad. So I talked him into doing an interview here with me, and mostly like a conversational based piece about hunting the rut. So what's been going on up to this point? And since the last time I talked here last week, got to hunt a little bit more here recently, and still not getting on much as far as deer from tree stand. It's been still a lot of scouting. Signs been popping up, kind of hanging sets as needed, and haven't been able to get that to really pay off much yet. We had a bear muzzleloader plus a youth and elderly rifle hunt this weekend, so it was kind of crazy in the woods. I was sitting in a spot this weekend that really wasn't that far from the road, but I thought I'd be able to get away from where the people were. I haven't seen anybody in there all year, and someone shot a rifle like 150 yards away from me in the clear cut, so that kind of put a damper on things a little bit, but I still sat till around noon and then got out and started scouting on the ground as there was rain coming in, so I knew would be good time to walk. So as the rain was coming down, I wanted to scout this clear cut more. I've been hunting the fringes of it a little bit and getting some nighttime photos of some good deer. I know they're coming from there, and this would be a good time to really get in there and figure out what's happening right now without leaving much scent behind and potential to shoot one of them off the ground. So I got in, found some hot signs, some scrapes. I was going to set up on it, and the wind just wasn't right. It was going right into the clear cut where I thought they'd be bedded, and I couldn't hunt it. So I backed out, and well, actually, I guess this is something I should note is right when I did that, I heard a deer snort at me, and I couldn't tell what it was, and it ran a little bit, and I saw its feet run. It wasn't very far from that scrape, and so I did a big loop around the outside of the clear cut to get the wind right, and I just walked the edge of it and grunted and just tried to see if I can get something stirred up out of its bed, and found this buck's bedroom that was just giant rubs. Everything looked good. It kind of funneled out of it. And as I was sneaking around through there, got down into the little creek bottom on the edge of the clear cut with a bunch of like standing pine trees and hemlocks and big scrapes going down through. Ultimate rut spot. Just great travel crossing. And as I was walking back up this old ATV trail, I snuck up because it was raining pretty good, so it was quiet to walk. I just walked at a snail's pace and still hunted, as you'll hear my dad talk about in this episode here. But I snuck up on 5 does, just starting to feed right before dark out in this logging road, and then ended up getting past them. And just about when I was getting back to the point where I was going to cut in where I had set up that camera earlier and jump that deer, it was getting pretty close to getting dark, and boom, this big buck jumps up 12 yards from me. Apparently that was a buck that I had winded me earlier, and he never went anywhere. He bumped up and moved his bed 20 yards, and even this time when he bumped out, because he just caught a glimpse of me, the wind was good, but just caught a glimpse of me. I don't think he went very far, but I just kept walking down the little road to act like nothing happened, and I just went around and was heading back towards my truck. But that was interesting to note. So I basically bumped him twice. I really don't think that he's going to go anywhere. He had security there, and now that gives me some intel where this buck is bedded. I don't know. It was tough to tell how big he was. They always look bigger running away, so look like a giant. But his body was just a tank. It was definitely a mature deer. So that was really, really good intel from that little still hunt yesterday. Or when I'm saying yesterday, I'm recording this on Sunday. So on Saturday evening there, October 26th. And so here's where it gets real interesting. I was heading back out to my truck, and all of a sudden I just stepped onto what looked like an old grassy area where there used to be a gas well, and just completely sunk down in. It was I stepped in something that was literally like quicksand but mud, and within 5 seconds I was up to my neck in it, and I couldn't get out, and I just kept sinking deeper every time I would move. And I was able to reach behind me and kind of use my backpack as like a flotation device. It was thick, but it was, I don't know how to explain it. And I was able to grab hold of this old gas well pole that was sticking out of the ground. This gas well probably hadn't been active in 40 years. It's old. And grabbed onto the pole, and after about 3 or 4 minutes of pulling, I was able to get myself out of the muck, and then I had to fish my bow out of it. But it was one of the scariest things that I've ever experienced. I mean, I literally think if I wouldn't have been able to grab onto that pole there, I don't know if I would have been able to get out. And I just kept sinking. There was no sign of the bottom. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I know some of these old gas walls, you have to watch out for holes and, little any sort of, they can be 5-foot deep holes sometimes that are kind of covered by leaves. But this one was 30 foot wide by 10 feet long. And it was just, I can't believe that it's not marked or anything. So I'm going to have to report that to somebody here and get that marked or fixed or something. I don't know how to explain it, but I don't know if anybody else has experienced anything like that, but literally just felt like quicksand. So yeah, that's what I'm spending today doing, cleaning up all my gears. It's just covered in this gross muck in my backpacks, my rangefinder, my binos, my grunt tube, everything I had just covered. So trying to get that taken care of here, but looking forward to, it's my last week of work, and then I'm off for a week. Yeah, for 1 week, using the rest of my vacation up to hunt whitetails here in Pennsylvania. Chris Derrick from Sika Gear will be coming in to hunt with me and doing some more product testing, some cool stuff. We'll record podcasts. It's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm hoping I can be tagged out before he even gets here, and then I'll just hunt bears at that point. But anyways, I hope everyone's season's going well. Got some cold weather coming in towards the end of this week. Should be good. And I hope you enjoy this episode with my dad, Joe Martonik. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. And tonight I'm sitting here with my dad, Joe Martonik. How's it going, Dad?
Pretty good. How you doing, Bo?
Can't complain. It's the end of October here, and we're getting close to the best time of year.
Yeah, I would say so for sure.
Yeah, we here in the big woods here, Pennsylvania, we're going to be really getting into the time of year when it seems like all of us seem to have the most luck, and we're kind of putting everything together and starting to have some bucks hit the ground, and hopefully we get some colder weather coming up here in the following weeks.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think the main reason that we look forward to the rut is obviously it's the most action. The deer are most responsive to calling, but we save our vacation for that. You don't get so much vacation in a year, and I think that this middle of October has the potential of being good, but I'm always leery about taking a week off for it because you never know. Every once in a while you pick up a good one on camera in daylight. Most of it's nighttime activity, but this coming up first couple weeks of November definitely is the time to be out there. Yeah, no,
you're exactly right. Like you said, you can have success, and I think we could do well if we hunted more in the middle of October and stuff like that. But I mean, when you have only so much time, you got to put the odds in your favor, and the odds are definitely a lot better during the rut. You can utilize all day and everything else.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, so I guess where I want to kind of get started here with this episode, it's going to be focused around hunting in these next few weeks, and we're recording this right about when it's going to release. So the end of October, leading into November. So I guess let's start off with, in the coming weeks here, and let's say in the next week, what are you kind of looking for as far as sign when it comes to hunting these whitetails in the end of October?
Mainly scrapes. I'm primarily a scrape hunter. This early, late October, early November, and the reason being because that's where the most sign is. Rub lines also. which usually comes hand in hand with scrape areas.
Mm-hmm. So with the scrapes, I mean, is there any, like, what kind of scrape are you looking for? Is there, I mean, there definitely, a lot of scrapes are popping up this time of year. How are you picking, your hunting setup for these scrapes?
Well, mainly the first thing I look for on a scrape is the size of the licking branch, which can be deceiving. I've had cameras on scrapes, and you don't have a big limb broke or snapped off, and a big buck still hits it. But if you find a scrape that is an annual, a scrape they're hitting every year, it's probably was made by the same buck. Multiple bucks are using it, obviously. But if you find a big licking branch that's broke off, and there's a good chance there's a real good buck in there that you're going to want to hunt, and usually the camera will show that also.
Yeah. So with these scrapes, when you're talking about like the licking branch, is there a certain size you're looking for as far as reference?
Yeah, big as your index finger, probably snapped off, would be ideal. But you don't, those sometimes are hard to come by. But there was, I don't know, I was always taught that if you found some big branches broke, is probably a long time buck. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's usually a good sized buck, something that I would definitely want to hunt and want to try to put on the ground.
Yeah, and it could too. I mean, depending on the height of the licking branch stuff, could potentially mean that the age of the deer a little bit. The taller, the deer that are hitting some of those higher ones and stuff. At least this is just my thought, is that the older deer, they stand a little bit taller as it is. They might really get into some of the higher branches. Do you see anything with that?
Oh yeah, definitely. The higher the branches, usually the taller the deer. You do see some you catch on camera, younger deer, they'll stand on their hind legs hitting these taller branches, but no, you're right. The higher the branches, the bigger the branches, typically means it's a bigger buck that's using it. And like I mentioned before, all the deer, all the bucks in that area are going to be using it. But it was probably made by that buck 3, 4, 5 years ago, and he just keeps on hitting it every year, and other deer are using it.
With these scrapes, like the location of them, or do you find any sort of correlation or pattern to like where they're at? Is like, say close to a bed, or I mean, they can bed in a lot of areas, but close to like thick stuff, or are you finding them on old logging roads? What's kind of your key for that?
Yeah, it's like travel areas. Old logging roads will have them on them, in old clear cuts on the edges of them. Something that's easy for a deer to travel on, where a lot of paths intersect each other. Creek bottoms, which are usually a good travel area in their own. That's kind of the areas I concentrate on.
Yeah. And with these scrapes, I mean, I know the answer to this because I know you, but as far as when you're looking for these scrapes and stuff, is this something that you're finding mostly in the season, or do you kind of have an idea already through previous scouting, spring scouting? How are you kind of going about, kind of scouting these areas out for these scrapes?
My ideal time to scout for scrapes is after hunt season's over and into this, and right, I guess around Thanksgiving, and I'm talking hunt season meaning our archery season, prior to the rifle season. That week, pretty much the rut's kind of winding down. You may get some trickle over into the first week or two of December, but for the most part, it seems like it's over in our area, and all the scrapes that were going to be made are kind of made. So when I'm going out, that I guess it'd be the week of Thanksgiving. I'm looking for what has happened if I didn't know it already happened in a certain area, and then come springtime, once that snow leaves, I mean, it's golden for, you got probably 2 months. You may have some snow on and off, but you probably have 2 months of scouting time that will show you a lot as far as the scrapes that were made that rut prior.
Yeah. And with a lot of those, the annual scrapes or the community scrapes or whatever you want to call them, you can kind of tell those when you're scouting in the spring, as far as you can see which ones are just the ones that were hit, as a buck was, depending on testosterone levels or whatever going down a road, or the ones that are, constantly being used.
Yeah. And it's, usually the size of the scrape. For one, but also, like I said, going back to that licking branch, if there's a good sized branch, big as my index finger, my thumb snapped off, then there's a good chance that it was a real good buck that was using that. Hopefully he made it through the rifle season at that point in time. You just don't know, and that's kind of why I'm out. I do my shed hunting to see what might have been, what made it through. But even so, if that buck did get shot in a rifle season, you mentioned the community scrape, and yeah, it's definitely other bucks you use it and will continue to use it. So it's always something to recheck on. I mark these on my GPS or my Onyx, and I'll go back to them here, this time of year, and I'll start throwing cameras on them usually in September. Just getting ready and see what happens. Things usually don't start heating up on them until middle of October. You'll get a spurt to where you'll get some photos, usually nighttime photos, but we've had some daylight ones here in the last week. But they're not. It's not going to be as frequent them visiting as it will here coming to first week of November or last week of October, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that this coming week's the best time for scrapes, as far as specifically hunting scrapes?
Yeah. In my opinion, I do. I've had my most success hunting scrape lines. The cameras have also showed similar results for the ones I'm not hunting. Where I should have been, so to speak, where a good buck has gone through in daylight hours.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, when it comes to the full out rut, and we'll get into that a little bit, but they don't have as much of a regimen to it as coming down and checking them scrapes. We've seen it where we're sitting on a spot where our camera's on a scrape, and you see 6-7 bucks in a day, and none of them go in front of your camera.
No, and that's exactly right. And cameras are real good, but they can also be really bad. It can be really misleading. I used to get discouraged when you get into that second week of November, and I'm not picking up any deer in my cameras. I'm thinking that they at least would walk through the scrape. But if I hunted them stands, there was one time I was sitting over a scrape or near a scrape, and I seen 5 different bucks go by 11 a.m., and not one of them went through the scrape, and my camera never picked any of them up. They were always, skirting the edge, downwind of it, or just like I said, there's a travel area where usually where they scrape, so they're going to use it regardless if they're going to hit the scrape.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is, no matter what, those areas you're still hunting similar in late October as you would throughout the first 2 weeks in November. It's just whether your cameras are picking it up or if they're actually using that scrape is a little bit different, or can be.
Yeah, and don't. I guess what I'm saying is, don't solely rely on your camera to tell you, come the first 2 weeks of November to whether you should hunt an area or not. If you picked up a good buck on a scrape, that last week of October or mid-October, there's a good chance that he's going to pass through there sometime during those first 2 weeks of November. And like I said, he may not walk through that scrape. If you're relying on your camera to tell you that, you may never see him, because he just, it's a travel area. He could be 10, 20, 30 yards away from it, just traveling through.
Mm-hmm. With the scrape setups, are you doing anything as far as, freshening them up, or any scents, or what are some of the kind of stuff that you like to use with those scrapes to, if anything?
Yeah, I'll put a pre-orbital on the licking branch.
Okay. Do you put anything in the scrape itself?
No, not normally. I mean, I've tried some different. I've tried scent drippers in the past, but I typically don't put anything commercial, I guess, in it that for scrapes.
Yeah. Excuse me, and I don't know if you do the same, but I always just piss in my own scrapes.
Well, I do too, but I didn't want that's not a. I guess I didn't know if you wanted me to say that on the airways or not.
It's a trick that not many talk about or think that it's an issue. But yeah.
Well, I was always brought up that you don't want any human scent. That if you had to take a piss, you went as far away from your hunting spot as you could to take a leak. But probably the last 10, 15 years, I piss right in the scrape, or I'll just take a leak out of my tree if I have to go. It doesn't bother them.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too, and I just always think that's funny.
I mean, that's my opinion and your opinion, and other people may say that it does, and I mean, who knows? Maybe a giant did get spooked that we didn't see, but
yeah. But for the most part, it hasn't affected you to this point.
Correct.
And I know that you, when possible, say someone in the family gets a buck or something, you're the first one to try to cut off the tarsal glands.
Yeah. Tarsal, fresh tarsal is gold in my book for hunting. There's been a lot of whether it's coincidental or not, or maybe it's just because it's getting hot. If somebody gets a good buck, and I'll take the tarsal, and sometimes it pays off within a day or two for me.
Yeah.
Whether it's coincidental, I don't know, but it sure ain't hurting. Let's just say that.
So what are you doing with the tarsal exactly?
I'll put it on a string, and I'll lay a scent trail down.
As you're walking in, you mean?
Yep. As I'm walking in, then I'll hang it somewhere near the scrape area, because like I said, I kind of hunt scrapes pretty much all the time, whether they're using them or not, just because it is a travel area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's a good point too. With the scrapes, usually they're in travel areas, which is what you're looking for, during the rut, and it just might be that one thing you need to get them to stop, or anything as far as for a shot opportunity when that comes down to it.
Yeah, and you got to be careful with a fresh tarsal, because they will start spoiling, and then they can become a deterrent. You got to try to keep them cold. I throw them in a freezer. As soon as I cut them off, it's usually in the evening when I'm done hunting, or you're visiting somebody got a nice buck, or they're brought to show you. And if they're wanting to give up their tarsal, I'll throw it right in the freezer. Put a string on it right then, and put it in a bag and throw it in the freezer, and then use it for, you might get 2 days out of it, especially if it gets pretty warm. If it's getting up in the 50s, 60s during the day, then you may only get 2 days out of it before you better get rid of it, or it's going to start deterring the deer.
Yeah, at that point, you're just hanging raw meat.
Yeah,
in your rotting meat.
Might have better chance of getting coyotes to come in.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea with bear season overlapping.
I don't know if you're not allowed to have anything like that for I believe for archery bear.
Oh, okay.
I have to reread that, but I think there's something funny about that where you can't use lures for. I have to reread that. Don't quote me on that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, okay. So you're using the preorbital and the tarsal glands as far as the scents go with hunting those scrapes, and so with some of these scrapes, you talked about finding them in the spring and everything, and the size of the licking branch, what you're looking for. Is there any specific types of trees that normally you're finding scrapes under? Any specific? I know you said crossings, but is there anything else that you can kind of key in on?
Our area, if I find a hemlock grove, I'll definitely check around the hemlocks. I like that, because then you can almost bury yourself into a hemlock with a hang-on setup. And the beech scrub too. They seem to like to hit the beech in some of the areas. But that's probably the two types of trees that I find my scrapes most commonly under. And the beech is usually what grows up into clear cuts, the older clear cuts, so it may just be coincidental for that. But hemlocks, I would say probably 60-70% of mine are under hemlocks.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to, too, a lot of our creek bottoms have hemlocks in them. It can be thicker like that through, and it seems like that's what they use. I see the same thing.
Well, and I don't know if you notice, and a lot of the clear cuts, they'll let the hemlock stand when they do the clear cut. It may be some of only a few trees left, and so they're usually a larger tree within a clear cut, especially an older clear cut. So that kind of lends itself well for them to scrape, especially if there's a old skid trail running right nearby it or right next to it.
Yeah, and I mean, it almost goes with, like, if you look at people that are hunting farm country and the food plots and stuff, that they have the lone trees normally have a scrape under, or people are putting fake trees in to have scrapes under with a logging cut. It's essentially, especially even fresh ones too, but they can be, they're essentially a food plot, and then you have these pine trees that are the big, scrape type areas. It's just, it's similar but different.
Yeah.
At the same time. And I guess on the side of logging cuts and clear cuts, anything specific there that you're looking for as far as, hunting them or any details with that?
I mean, the clear cuts, I find it's difficult to find decent trees that give you some cover to hang in. I like to still hunt them. And when I'm still hunting them, I'm kind of keeping the wind in my face and following a scrape line, and just doing some calling as I go.
When you say still hunting, you mean hunting off the ground, kind of just slowly walking?
Yeah. Yep. Just taking my time going through, and may take you, 20 minutes to go 100 yards or less, and just take a few steps, call, and just important things, just keeping the wind, in your face, pretty much. Mm-hmm. So you have to pick your days. You can't just go any day and plan on still hunting a clear cut, because if the wind's shifting back and forth, or even if it's too dry and just too noisy, and so you have to pick your days. Certain days that lend themselves better than others. As far as hanging on them, the edges is usually where you can find good trees to hunt them, and then I'll pick a tree that's on the downwind side of the clear cut. I feel that the bucks are cruising that outside edge. They're not gonna just, especially on a somewhat newer clear cut to where it's pretty thick. They're not gonna want to fight their way through it. They're going to be on that downwind edge and just sending any doe that inside that clear cut that may be bedded or feeding or just hiding, and so I think the downwind edges are a good place to set up for that.
Yeah, I want to get back to that point in a minute, but what I want to go a little bit further into is the still hunting thing was something that I remember when I was younger, and I don't know if I might have still been in high school, or maybe I was beginning of college, whatever it was. You were letting me hunt some of your stands, and I wasn't sitting in there long enough, because you were talking about, the midday movement of the bucks in there, and you said, listen, if you're having trouble, day after day getting up and going in, said wait until first light and walk in, and just call your way into the stand, and then sit longer as far as that goes. And I was pleasantly surprised some of the times when you're walking like that and being able to call in bucks, at first light.
Yeah. I remember those days well. You always seem to pull out, and the cameras usually showed you about a half hour, 45 minutes too early. Yeah.
Yeah, you had that one creek bottom spot that I remember sitting, and I was texting you from it. I had a flip phone at the time. I remember texting you and being like, I'm going to get down. It was like 10 o'clock. And you're like, no, the camera shows, you got to stay there till at least 11:30. And you wanted me to stay there all day, but you're like, at least 11:30. Between 10:30 and 11:30 has been historically good in this area. I'm like, I don't know. And I was halfway down the sticks, and here comes this buck. And I ended up getting to the ground and untying the bow. And you already had your buck tag filled, because actually I think I was using your bow. And I remember the buck still came in even though I was climbing down, and I tried to draw back and shoot, and that was when we had the rests that weren't full capture, and I had my finger over top the arrow, and I pulled the knock right out of the arrow, and I was at full draw with the arrow just kind of dangling there and a buck looking at me.
Yeah.
So I learned from that, and I learned from the other experiences with your cameras where you get a picture of me walking out, and literally 45 minutes later, nice bucks cruising down through there.
yeah, that happened more than once.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to learn from that. That's
well, and that's kind of how I actually got into the still hunting. It was, everybody here pretty much tree stand hunts. Don't rifle, people do a lot of walking, but all the archery hunters, when I was growing up, you sat in a tree. That's what you did. And I had a hard time when I was younger to sit all day or even sit for a few hours. So then you're sitting in the tree and nothing's happening. You're looking over and thinking, boy, I bet it's better over there. And then I got to the thing where, hey, why not just walk over there and just hunt my way slowly over there? Like I said, as long as you keep the wind in your face, and then you get to where you think might be better, and it usually wasn't. But at least it kept you in the game instead of going back home, going back to the truck or whatever. It kept you in the game. You're still out there hunting.
Yeah. And so one specific story I can think of with that is buck, behind me as I'm sitting here in your basement is an 11 point you shot with small drop tine there back in 2005. I remember the story of you hunting that deer. Do you kind of want to explain kind of from beginning to end to hunting that?
Yeah, I had picked him up on a scrape only once, and it was probably, actually, it was early. I think he started work. He hit that scrape. It might have been the first week of October. But actually, no, it might have been even in September. I think it was in like the third week of September. Because it was before our season came in, and our season typically comes in the first weekend of October. So I was all excited, couldn't wait for the season and to start, and started hunting that scrape. And I actually sat in trees around that scrape area. There was multiple scrapes within I guess probably a couple 100 yards, 150 yards that I would, wasn't sitting in the same tree every time, but different trees depending on the wind. But I spent, I think it was 21 different days in the tree. And not all of them were all-day sits, but a lot of them were at least 4 or 5 hour sits in the morning or the evening without seeing a deer. And but his sign was telling me that he was active at night. And at that time, we had film cameras, so 24 photos filled your roll of film, and I never caught him again on camera, just other deer. And it was November 7th, maybe
8th.
November 8th. It was a cold, frosty morning. I thought this is the day, and I sat till probably about 10:30, and by then it had warmed up to about 60 degrees. It warmed up very quickly, and I think they were actually forecasting to get in the mid-60s that day. So I got down out of the tree like I normally do, and then I thought, you know what? I was on the edge of a clear cut, and I thought, I know we got to be better than that clear cut. So I decided that I was just, it was prime time to where they would start responding to calls, or should be responding to calls. So I decided I would go in after them, and as luck would have it, it all worked out. I mean, I running them in and shot them coming straight at me, probably about 15 yards, and yeah, it was one of those rare occasions that a target buck that I'm hunting actually ended up hitting the ground for me.
And when And I remember that story too. So you were basically just walking logging roads, weren't you? To kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was the clear cut was too thick to just randomly walk through. So I was, walking the skid trails that wound through it, which, I mean, there was, yeah, like I said, it was thick, so you just can't just bust through. But I just kept the wind in my face and follow these skid trails. And if the wind shifted, I would shift my direction to compensate for it.
Yeah, and when you were doing that, a couple of the different things that I know that you do, as far as when you say you're grunting going through the clear cuts. One thing you taught me is about even making noise every once in a while.
Oh yeah. You don't want to be just scuffing your feet and just randomly walking through, but you want to be sneaking through. But you can break branches. I mean, you got to sound like, especially when you're grunting, like a buck's chasing. And if you ever heard a buck chasing, which I know you have. They just go crashing through. They're trying to cut the doe off or what have you, and that doe's just going like hell. Also, I mean, there's some commotion going on. So when I'm still hunting a clear cut and grunting, I'll break some branches.
Yeah, and I remember one situation I had where I did something like that where I was still hunting, and literally what I would do is. Basically, I'd try to be quiet, and then whenever I'd snap a branch, I'd just grunt.
Yeah.
Grunt after it and kind of cover up your noise a little bit. And I remember having one come running right in, but it was where he ended up stopping and looking out at. I didn't have a shot into the cut, but that was it worked. I mean, you're sounding like a deer.
Yeah, and one thing that if you're going to hunt that style, one shot you need to practice is the frontal shot. Because I don't know if I know I've never shot a deer broadside still hunting a clear cut. It's always been them crashing in, coming at you, looking for a fight or whatever it may be. Hell, I remember one time I almost had to shoot a spike in self-defense. I heard the cry. I just finished the grunting and then I heard it crashing, so I went to full draw waiting. And this spike just come out of nowhere and stopped at almost the tip of my arrow. I mean, I'm just hollering at it, at this point in time because he's bobbing his head and he had some decent spikes on him. And I thought, son of a gun, I'm gonna have to shoot you. You're gonna before you start poking me here. But finally. I don't think I spooked him, but he finally gave up and took off the other way, and he realized it wasn't a deer. But I think he went away proud, thinking that he had scared me because he did.
And I remember on that 11 point that we were just talking the story on that you shot frontal at him at about 15 yards.
Yeah.
And you have a picture of the arrow, an old Muzzy. Was it on an aluminum arrow at the time, or was that a carbon arrow?
Actually,
is that straight up there? Is that the right arrow?
No, that's not the right arrow.
I think it was an aluminum arrow.
Yeah, I believe it was aluminum arrow then I was using. But it was the Muzzy 4-blade. And that threaded pretty much the whole way down through him. It actually exited back low in the belly and entered the hind leg and passed through his hind leg, and the fletch is the only thing that kept it from going all the way through the hind leg. And that was the opposite side. I slid it in the front right shoulder basically, and it came out the back left leg, but it pretty much took every vital out of him.
Yeah, I mean that shot's lethal, and if you can thread in that that spot there, which is why it's better for a closer shot than anything, which is normally in them clear cuts you're not shooting very far anyways.
Yeah, and that's at least back then I always was a firm believer in the fixed blade because of especially the Muzzy had the chisel tip for that reason. If you did catch shoulder blade or any kind of bone, hopefully it would deflect in. But where I think expandables, at least back then, you would lose penetration right away. And I don't know if you'd ever get, if you didn't hit it just right, you'd have as much forgiveness as you would with a fixed blade.
Yeah. No, and then, I mean, you still shoot fixed blades to this
Yeah,
day. You and
yeah.
I both tried a little bit of messing around with some other ones and ended up coming back to shooting a fixed blade. I mean, it's just not always you can have that perfect shot, and especially when you're hunting off the ground or even in the tree in a lot of these spots, you don't always have the perfect shot angle. And, I mean, you always want to take an ethical shot, but you're a lot more confident in your arrow setup.
Well, and that comes down to your practice. And, I mean, archery, you can shoot your bow once or twice in a year and still be lucky and make a decent shot. But I'm a firm believer that you got to put your time, as well as you are, shooting the bow all spring, all summer, all fall, and during the season, and have these scenarios going through your head. If you have to take a frontal shot and know your limitations as far as your distances, of what you think you can be effective at. If you don't feel comfortable, then you just don't take the shot. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And it all comes down to your confidence. If you know that you can make that shot, then then you'll make it when it happens. But I mean, that's when it's funny, recently I've, in the last 3-4 years, seen a lot of things like when it comes to elk hunting, talking about the frontal shot, and with Corey Jacobson's a big proponent of it and everything. And one thing I guess we should probably talk about is not an ideal shot out of a tree stand, but at a ground level, that's
right. Exactly. Hopefully out of a tree stand, you're able to, I'm gonna say pick your shot, or pick, I've grounded, plenty of deer in and out of the tree stand, and they do come in and then they'll stop and they'll kind of look around. They're looking for that deer. They're looking for it. Where when you're on the ground, they pretty much got you pinpointed. When you're in the tree and you grounded, they come running in. They're looking at. They have you pinpointed, but they're looking down and not so much up at you. So they'll stop, and they're not spooked yet, and should give you an opportunity to do a better shot placement as far as possibly getting a broadside shot on it or whatever it may be. Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit to talking about calling. You've talked about that quite a bit. During this time of year, let's just say from Halloween on, let's kind of get into more of the rut. What's your kind of calling look like? Are you doing any blind calling? You just call when you see a deer? What's that kind of look like?
Probably this. I'll do blind calling. It'll pick up more come the second week of November. But if I do see a buck, I'm gonna make a call to it. If it doesn't look like he's coming my way to begin with, and I'll throw some bleats in along with it. I've done some rattling. I'm not that's not my primary tool to go to. I know plenty of people that love to rattle and have good success with rattling. Myself, I don't know if I ever shot a deer bringing it on a rattle. I've brought some in that were smaller bucks, but as far as the larger bucks, it's always been the grunt bleat combination or just a grunt.
Yeah, the grunt bleat combination's a great one for blind calling, in my opinion, especially because we're in such thick areas. A lot of times you can only see 30 yards at a time. Bucks can pass 60, 70 yards out of range of you, and you'll never know it. Mm-hmm. So you calling, in my opinion, is huge for that. And I'll take the little bleat can, just a little Primos bleat can, dump it twice, make the bleat sound, and then follow it up with a grunting sequence. And I like to take my grunt tube and move it in the direction, like almost acting like it's running in a certain way, brr, 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 the whole way, down around. And I think in Pennsylvania and Ohio, I think probably the last 4 of my 5 bow kills have been doing after that sequence from a blind call.
Mm-hmm.
Only one of the bucks, kind of showed up without me calling, I think.
Yeah, and one thing, especially with the grunt tube, you got to be careful. You're saying you throw it, and you're moving and throwing your sound. I used to do a lot of, especially if I seen a deer, I'd try to grunt like behind a tree to make it sound like the deer's behind me, so that the deer would come through me to get to it, and it would actually work. But usually the buck would be coming in, and I couldn't get him to stop until he was behind a tree, and I wasn't able to stop because most of my shooting lanes were out in front of me.
Yeah.
So it would, in a sense, it would backfire on different occasions for me. But yeah, you definitely got to. You just don't want to hold your tube in one position and sit there and just keep on grunting in the same spot. You want to move it around a little bit, get that, make it sound realistic.
Yeah, I agree. What about all right? So with your tree stand setups, are you mostly hunting mobile, or are you putting up stands ahead of the season? What's kind of your strategy with that?
I usually try to get between 6 and 8 hang-ons, lock-ons, what do you want to call them, sticks up, prior to the season or during the season, right prior to the rut. But I also have a climbing stand, a couple climbing stands that I utilize. And to be honest with you, probably 95% of my deer kills, if they weren't on the ground, have been out of my climber. I almost want to say that it almost seems like I'm wasting my time putting these sticks up and these platforms, but last year's kill was out of a platform, but I just sometimes I wonder if I should just carry my climber the whole time instead of putting all these sticks and platforms up, because then you got to pull them, and I try to get all mine out, or I do get them all out as soon as our season ends before the rifle season begins, and that's a lot. It's a lot of work getting them all back in.
Yeah, and do you think that with the reason why most of the success comes out of the climber stands is because you're getting on hot sign and just setting up on that, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's probably a true statement. Yeah, because and not to say that my hang on where I put it over a scrape line or something wouldn't be hot the following week. It just so happens to be that I'm in, when it starts getting that in the first couple weeks of November. Whether I can only spend an hour or two in the woods or the whole day, I try to spend every day in the woods. Like I said, it may only be an hour after work, or if it's a weekend, on a Saturday, you get to spend a whole day, or you take a day off work and spend the whole day. But yeah, you find a hot sign. I usually have my climber in my truck or my vehicle, and go back and get it and throw it up if it isn't already on my back.
Yeah. And you're now a little bit kind of getting into, you picked up an XOP stand and some Lone Wolf sticks.
Yeah.
As far as trying the hang and hunt kind of style too. Have you got used to that yet, or have you done
No,
much with that?
I'm still struggling with that setup. I did get the first attempt of doing it. I think it took me, I ended up, the first tree I couldn't get the straps around it, so then I had to move to another tree, which wasn't ideal at all. But I think it took me a little better than an hour to do my first setup. I did one here just last week, and I think I was set up in a half hour. And the first time I think I went to the bottom for every stick, which I know you've explained to me how you hang them, and you don't, as soon as you start up, you never hit the ground until you're done hunting. Mm-hmm. Last week when I did it, I think I had to go back down twice, instead of, just for the platform I had to tie on. I didn't have that tied on, and then go down and tie my bow up. So I'm still learning the ropes on it. I haven't given up on it by any means, but Yeah, I'm still learning the ropes on it.
Yeah, and that's something probably too that that once if you decide that's what you want to do a little bit more of, in the summertime or something, practice with it and get a system down with it. Took me a little bit to learn it myself.
Right, and I probably should watch videos, or I listen to you, but I've never seen you actually do it, and it's a lot better when you can see something.
Yeah.
For me, if I see it happen, then I get the gist of it a lot quicker.
Yeah, you're not watching as many YouTube videos and stuff as I am that help reduce the learning curve.
I don't think I watched it. I know I haven't watched a video of anybody doing a hang and hunt.
Yeah. I did send you the video recently of using the saddle.
Yeah, I haven't got through that yet, though.
Yeah.
And that's something that intrigues me. I'd like to try yours out one of these days. Just probably be after the season. I don't want to know if I want to take your time or my time up right now to play around with that, especially when we're starting to get into the heat of things here.
Yeah, but no, I think I guess what I was coming down to there with the stands is, since you can get to some of these areas after work and all this stuff, that you're able to hang physical stands in the trees, some that you might that if you need to get into quick for an hour hunt, that's what makes the lock-on stands, the hang-ons that are
that's
fixed,
exactly
make
right.
them so much nicer.
Yep. And I guess getting back to why I seem to be more successful out of my climber, thinking more into it, it's usually when I'm prepared to do an all-day sit. I will rather sit in a climber than on a lock-on with just a padded seat, where at least in the climber, if I want to take a nap, I'm a little more secure.
Yeah.
Where I can't just topple right out. So that's probably, just thinking into it, I never really thought much about it, but that's probably where the success from the climber, is a lot more than on the lock-ons, because I'm just preparing myself for an all-day sit, and I am out there all day. Instead of having to come in and go to work, or running in after work and only having an hour or two before it gets dark. So that's probably more the reason, where if I could sit all day in a lock-on, then I'd probably have the same amount of success.
Yeah. Do you so you're talking about sitting all day, is that something that during the rut, say you have a week off or 2 weeks off or whatever it is, what time frame do you start pulling those all day sits?
Well, definitely from Halloween on, but it comes down to the weather. If it's going to get up to 60, 65 during the day, I'll probably end up coming in for a little bit, just because that deer, he has his winter coat on, and the rut. If the rut isn't, or if they're not into the full seeking phase, they're not going to be. They're going to be bedded, during that hottest time of the day. Now later on, when you get the heavy chasing going on, I've seen them running at 65 degrees out, and their tongues hanging out, and it's just they're just driven.
Yeah. And so with the all day sits and stuff, when do you, or I guess let's just not say even all day sits. Let's look at come as you're getting into the latter part of the first week in November and the second week in November, when are you seeing most of your buck movement in some of those travel areas, whether that's at creek bottom over a scrape, some creek crossings? What is there any certain time frames you're seeing the best movement?
I always try to get in before it gets light. Just mainly, I think that if you bump a deer when it's dark, you have less enough effect, at least in my belief, than you would if it was daylight. So I always enter my stands prior to getting light. But usually the activity, I'm saying, 9 to 11 is probably more of the activity than I would say from daylight to 9 a.m. Not to say I've killed deer at 7:30, 8 in the morning, right at first light, but probably most of the action is a little later in the morning.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. Looking back at it, I don't know if I've really killed any during the rut at first light. I think most of mine have been from 9, 10 o'clock on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I think the earliest one was in 2016. I remember that's when you're not really paying attention, which we still are, but to the barometric pressure and as how that rises. And at the highest part of the day was slated for 9:30 in the morning on that day, and it was going to hit, I can't remember what the number was, 31 or 31 and a half, something like that. It was a pretty high number. And it was like right at that time I grunted in an 8-point and shot them. But for the most part, I mean, I've killed a couple around noon, and I think most of the rest of mine have been in the afternoon.
Yeah, you've killed a lot later, 4 or 5. Yeah, early evening. Of course, what time it usually get dark.
Yeah, it depends on if it's before the time change or not.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, but but me personally, I kind of like the mid-morning, late mornings. But I'll sit, and then there seems to be a peak, one or two of some action. I mean, you'll have your lulls during the day if you're doing an all-day sit. And it's just you're just wondering why you're still out there.
Yeah.
But then it seems like there's a run. You may see a couple bucks come cruising through, and or maybe some chasing going on, and then it's dead for another 2-3 hours before, and it may be that way the rest of the day. As well as I do, you can put some long days in and not have any action.
Yeah, no, that's so true. But with that being said, it only takes one to change it. And if you're not sitting in the tree or you're not hunting at all, whether it's on the ground or in the tree, then you're not really in the game.
No, that's exactly right. If you're not out there, your chances are zero.
Yeah. And so I guess this year, so you're going to get to hunt. Do you think you'll get much time to hunt Pennsylvania this year? I know our season goes a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I still haven't worked out the details as to what time, when I'm going to take my time off. But I'm hoping to be able to get some time off here, whether it be a week or close to 2 weeks. I am going to be going to Ohio right after our season ends, so I have a week for that. So that'll be like the third week in November you'll be in Ohio? Yeah, I think we leave the 17th, the day after our season ends. Be out there for a week. So that's going to take up some of my time. But I'm going to just play it by ear and see what the weather patterns are going to bring as the time gets closer, and what fresh sign or what I'm seeing on my cameras, or the couple hours after work here in the next week to help lay out my plan, I guess. So I guess one last thing I wanted to say. So if you had, say, one or two things that you could leave somebody with as far as when it comes to hunting the rut and the big woods, or the steeper country in the mountains of Pennsylvania or anywhere near here, is there any sort of tips or any couple last thoughts on that? Well, I mean, as far as the hunting Pennsylvania, I'm just primarily our area, and I'm not. I don't know if I ever hunted any farmland, so I can't speak for that. But for the big woods, you just got to spend time. I mean, that increases your odds, and be there at the right time. And the right time can vary year to year, but I will say that I am a firm believer that the rut's going to happen. That towards the end of that first week of November, second week of November, regardless of the weather, it's just a matter of how much daylight activity there is. If you have cool weather, then you're going to see some daylight activity. If it's hot, most of the action is going to happen at night when you're not out there.
Yeah.
Not to say you can't still see some or get some action in the daytime, but it's definitely going to be a harder go. But you got to spend the time. You got to make the time. And preparation. I mean, you can not set foot in the woods all year and go out and get lucky. And people do it. People do it every year. But I think your odds go up knowing the behavior, learning the behavior of the deer, running cameras pretty much year round, and getting out and just enjoying the outdoors, but also scouting for deer. I mean, as you know, it's pretty much a year-round event for us.
Yeah, not pretty much. It is.
Well, yeah. I remember, what is it? Was it 2015 when I shot that one the first day? And actually, I did a grunt. I was
still hunting a clear cut.
Yeah, it was a rainy day, and I remember I didn't even go out in the morning because it was pouring, and all you guys still went out. And maybe it's my old age that told me not to go, but or just looking for an easy excuse. But I waited till I think it was probably close to 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon when it started letting up, and before I went, and I had my stand on my back, went where I wanted to go because my cameras were showing that the scrape was hot. That week prior they were just starting to scrape, and so I went to check my camera, and if I had anything good on it, then I was going to climb the tree. I had a tree picked out and everything. Well, I got there, I pulled my camera card and checked it, and I never had a deer picture in the whole week it was out, and not a one. So that kind of changed things for me. So I ended up hiking back to the truck, put my stand in, and this was on the downwind edge of a clear cut is where I was planning on setting up. So I thought, well, it's quiet. I'm just going to go into this clear cut and just see, just mainly. Maybe I can catch something, but mainly just to scout it along with hunting it. And I was just poking along, and I heard, and the wind was in my face, and I remember I heard heavy hoofs hitting the ground, so I knew I jumped a deer. But I knew it didn't know what I was because there's no way it could have winded me. So I just gave a couple grunts on my grunt tube and waited and took a couple more steps, and a couple more steps, gave another couple grunts, and then I kind of looked up this skid trail, and there he was. He was coming straight at me, and he just stood there. And then once again, he hit a frame. I knew what the potential was in that clear cut from running cameras, and he had the frame of a shooter, so I took him. But I remember, everybody saying, now what are you going to do? You just shot one on the first day, and you only get one buck tag in PA. And it's just like, well, I thought long and hard. It's like, I was actually kind of relieved because I've been actually scouting and running cameras all summer, all spring, summer long.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the first day for me. It was kind of, it was just earlier. Yeah, I missed the rut. I didn't get to hunt the rut action, the action of that. But, that was only, maybe a month earlier than probably, you're looking at a 12-month calendar. A month isn't a big difference.
No, the first day of archery isn't really the first day of the season.
No,
in reality.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right, well, I think that's good. I think we'll end this podcast on that note and get into some serious hunting here over the next, I guess, 3 weeks left of our season here.
Yeah, it's a little different with little longer. Seems like a little longer season.
Just the way the calendar fell this year. Yeah,
I really haven't digested it too much yet, but I'm kind of excited because usually you pick up your biggest bucks in daylight after the season's over. So
yeah,
it may spill into our season. May still be going on when that starts to happen.
Yeah, it does. It does seem like, at least for both of us, that you have more bucks moving in the first week to 2 weeks in November, but coming into that 11th through 16th, 17th, you get some of the biggest ones moving. Might not have as many pictures on the camera. This is just from camera action, but
yeah.
As you seem to have some pretty good ones moving at that time. So, all right, well, again, we'll end this podcast here, and yeah, hopefully we have some bucks on the ground here shortly.
Yeah, then hopefully luck deals us a good hand.
Yep. When what do they say when something meets luck? What is it? Preparation
meets opportunity. That's the definition of luck.
Yep. Yeah, that's that's exactly right. All right, Dad. Well, thanks for coming on.
Well, I appreciate you asking me.
Yep. We'll talk soon.
Yep.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Joe Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.